Hello everybody. Welcome to one more exciting session in series AWS Bootcamp. In this particular session, I will introduce you guys to cloud storage and understand about AWS S3. We'll understand about Amazon EBS and EFS. That would be the agenda for this session. First of all, what is cloud storage? Now, cloud storage can be defined. It is like storing digital data over the internet on servers that can be placed in different regions. The advantage of this cloud storage, it is scalable, it is secured. That means if you want to store 1 GB of data, you can store 1 GB. If you want to store 100 GB of data, you can store 100 GB. The storage, the cloud storage is very scalable and it is secure. And it's easy to manage because there is no infrastructure that you're going to create. uh, all that you're doing is that you're accessing the infrastructure on AWS, and it is very durable in the sense how long you can store that particular object. Now AWS gives 99.99% durable. That means once in 10,000 years out of 1 lakh files, there's a chance of losing only one file. That is the durability that you get on AWS. Now, AWS offers multiple service to store data. Those are like, again, to store data, you can store data in different ways. Like you can store data on blocks. You can store file data as files. You can store data as objects. So AWS has different services for this different kinds of storages. If we speak about block storage, there are two services on AWS. One is called as Amazon EBS. Second one is called as Instance Store. And to store object kind of storage, AWS has a service called as Amazon S3 and Amazon Glacier. Glacier is basically used to for the archival storage, or if you want to store any data for longer times. And if you want to work with a network kind of file storage, AWS offers a service called as EFS. Right? And if you want to bring the data from your on-premises to AWS, how you can do that? There are multiple ways. One is called as Snowball. Second one is called as Storage Gateway, Direct Connect, Kinesis, uh, S3 acceleration, or any third-party connectors. With the help of these services, you can bring data to AWS. Now let us discuss about all these services one by one, and there'll be a lot of lab exercises so that you guys could be confident working with EBS storage, EFS storage, or S3 storage. Let's discuss about Amazon S3. What is Amazon S3? Amazon S3 is called as simple storage service. Okay, nothing complication. You can store any kind of data, be it a PDF file, be it a CSV file, be it an Avro file, ORC file, videos, images, any type of file you can store on AWS S3 service. Now, Amazon S3 is an object storage service that offers industry leading scalability, data availability, security, and performance. So, anything that you're going to store on Amazon S3, it stores the data in the form of object. So, once you store data on Amazon S3, you cannot modify it, but you can upload multiple versions of the same file. It has the highest availability and it gives you the best performance. Now, customers of all sizes and industries can use Amazon S3 to store and protect any amount of data for a range of use cases. Even if it is a big company or it's a small company, you can use Amazon S3 to store your data. And AWS advertises Amazon S3 service as infinitely scaling storage. That means you can store huge amounts of data. Now let us see a small architecture here. Now the instance that you're looking here, you can call it as a virtual machine or an EC2 instance, where whatever data that is coming, if there's an application hosted on this EC2 instance. Now if data has to be stored on S3, it is possible with the help of a VPC endpoint here. Now whatever data that is coming to the EC2 instance, it is stored on the S3 bucket. This is one of the use case. There are a lot of other use cases we will see throughout this course. Now let us discuss about couple of components of S3. So one of the major component on AWS S3 is called as bucket. Now a bucket is a logical container to store any object on Amazon S3. If at all you have to store any documents on AWS S3, the first thing that you have to create is called as a bucket. And inside buckets, you can store objects. You can store any number of objects, but the maximum number of buckets you can create in your account is 100. If you want more than 100 buckets, you can send out an email to AWS asking them to increase the number of buckets that you can create. Now, couple of things that you need to remember when you are creating a bucket. A bucket name should be globally unique, and buckets are defined at a regional level. Now, when you're creating a bucket, you need to make sure that there is no uppercases, there is no underscores, it is not an IP address, and the characters should be minimum 3 to max 63 characters. It should start with a lowercase letter or a number. These are the some of the things that you have to keep in mind when you are giving names to the S3 bucket. Now another component on AWS S3 is called as objects. Now the first component is buckets. Now inside buckets, what we'll do, we'll store objects or we'll store data. How we are going to store the data? In the form of objects. Now AWS S3 is an object storage, right? Now objects are the fundamental entities stored in Amazon S3. Objects consist of object data and metadata. An object is uniquely identified within a bucket by a key or a version ID. Now the key is composed of two things. One is the bucket name and the object name that is there in the particular bucket. Now if there is a folder, then it is like the key consists of the bucket name, the folder name and the object name. So that will be the key of the object that you're going to load into the bucket. Now the object can have the maximum size of an object can be basically about 5 TB. You cannot, one object cannot be beyond 5 TB. See, in a one bucket, there can be multiple objects, but one object size cannot go beyond 5 TB. And if you're uploading a object of bigger size, it is advised to use a multi-part upload if because if the upload fails, again you need to start from the first. All right, though that is about objects. So we discussed about two components. One component is called as bucket, second component is called as objects. Now there is another component called as keys. Now, a object key is a unique identifier for an object within a bucket. So now every object will get a key. That is a unique identifier. Every object in a bucket has exactly one key. Okay. Every object has one key and it will be unique. Now, Amazon S3 data maps between the bucket plus key plus version and the object itself. Okay. Now, let us discuss about versioning. Now, on AWS S3, you can version to keep multiple variants of objects in the same bucket. With S3 versioning, you will preserve, retrieve, and restore every version of every object stored in your buckets. That means, let's say if I have a file name levelup.txt, I can upload different versions of the same file multiple times. You can easily recover from both unintended user actions and application failures. So why we are enabling versions? If anybody corrupts the data, if any user corrupts the data, we can go to a different version of the file where you will have the data that you wanted. Now we'll have one lab exercises on versioning, how to enable versioning. We'll upload multiple objects with the same name, and we will see whether different versions of the data is there or not in the next chapters. So basically, if you want to work with feature called as versioning, first of all, we have to enable S3 versioning on the bucket. Now, by default, the versioning is not enabled. You have to enable the versioning. Now, objects that already existed in the bucket at the same time that you enable version have a version ID of null. If there's already some objects, if there is only one version of a file, it will be by default the version ID will be null. When you upload another version of the same file, then the object will get a version ID. If you modify these objects with other operations such as copy object or put object, the new objects get a new version ID. That is about versioning. Now, if I have to compare using S3 storage and traditional storage, now you will save a lot if you architect your S3 buckets well. You will, because one of the reason is that uh, when you are storing data on premises, you are actually paying for the storage that you're not using also. That means, let's say you purchase a hard disk of 1 TB. Now there is data of 500 GB. So are you paying for 500 GB or 1 TB? You're paying for 1 TB because you have already purchased 1 TB storage. So you are investing the money upfront even before you have the data. But in the cloud, you will be paying only for the amount of storage space that you're storing on the cloud. Now, if you want to bring data to cloud, how you can bring? The two options, one is Snowball, one is storage gateway. There is also something called as direct connect. We'll discuss in detail about these services in the subsequent chapters. Now, why should we opt for AWS S3 cloud storage? As I was telling you, now pay for the infrastructure you use with no upfront. There is absolutely no upfront charges. Now, inactive data is sitting on costly storage. Up to 90% of data is cold. Now, data reduction technique and archiving to store inactive data. So now, if you're not accessing the data frequently, you want to put that on a storage class that is inexpensive. Now, AWS S3 offers a different kind of storage classes where active data could be on the higher tier and cold data could be in lower tier. Okay, we will discuss in the subsequent chapters about the different storage classes and how to move data from one storage class to another storage class. You can store documents, images, any other files very rapidly. Those are some of the uses of using S3 storage or your uh, traditional on-premises systems. And there are a couple of more use cases, like if you want to do backup. uh, Normally in a backup during the day the process would be very slow, but if you're using S3 for your backup, it would be fast and it is more efficient, and for the migrations it is very efficient. These are the some of the use cases where you can think of having S3 storage than your traditional on-premises storage. All right, now there is another kind of storage. Now if you want to use a block storage on AWS, you can use a service called as Amazon EBS. EBS stands for Elastic Block Storage. Amazon EBS is used for quickly accessible data and long time persistent data. Best suits for file systems, databases, or any applications that requires the granular updates and access to raw, unformatted block storage level. Now, there is also something called as instance store. An instance store provides temporary block storage to a EC2 instance. It is used for storing data related to buffers, cache, scratch data, and other temporary content, or for data that is replicated across a fleet of instances. Now, if you see in this image, in a subnet name, there is instance. The instance is connected with an external volume, and that volume is called as EBS volume. And it's not just one volume. You see in the picture which is there on the right, you can connect two EBS volumes also. So it's not restricted that you have to connect only one EBS volume. You can connect multiple EBS volumes to the EC2 instance, so that the EC2 instance will get more storage space. Okay, now let's say if I have, now if you see the slide before, now this volume is external to the virtual machine. Okay, this EC2 instance is not, this volume is not inside the EC2 instance, it is external. Okay, now if you see this one, there's a volume inside the EC2 instance also. Now that disk or volume, we can call it as a instance store. Now if you have a volume external to the EC2 instance, that one we call it as EBS, elastic block storage. And now let's say the volume which is there inside the instance, what we call as instance store, if that is having an OS, we call that as a root volume. Okay, and now let's say the volume, the OS, if the OS is there on the EBS, now this EBS is called as root volume. So basically, wherever the operating system is there, that is basically called as a root volume, and your operating system can be there in instance store as well. Your operating system can be there in EBS as well. So EBS is the elastic block storage. It is external to the instance store. That means the volume is there inside the instance. That is the difference between a instance store and EBS. Now we have another type of data storage, or if you want to store if you want to store file systems, we have another storage called as EFS. EFS stands for Elastic File System. Now it provides scalable file storage for use with Amazon EC2. EFS file system is used as common data source for workloads and applications running on multiple instances. Okay, now let's see the picture here. Now you see there are multiple EC2 instances, and I want to have one common storage where everybody who logs into any of this EC2 instance should have a read and write access. Then EFS can be mounted to all the EC2 instances. It's like a shared file system. Okay, that is called as EFS. Now there are a lot of them, right? Like there is EBS, EFS, S3. Now which one to use when? Now let's say if you want to host a OS or a database, the best option is EBS. I don't recommend to put a OS on your S3 or else on EFS. So hosting, that means if you want to put your operating system or a database, EBS is the best option. For distributing computing, EFS is best option. Like if you want to build a big data cluster, then I would recommend for EFS. For to store social media images, videos, S3 is the best option. For media workflow application, EFS. If you want to have a low latency data access, which one do you think would be best option? If you guys have guessed EBS, then that's the right option because it provides the highest performance among all three. And if you want to host a static website, S3 is the good option. And if you want to have if cost is a criteria for you, and if you want to have least storage cost for backup or retrieval, yes, it is going to be S3. And if you want to create containers which is having persistent storage, then EFS is the right option. And for the data lake, S3 is what you will be looking to store the data. And if you want to exchange data for analytics and machine learning between different organizations, yes, again, S3 is where you will store your data. So these are the different use cases of way to store which kind of data on which kind of AWS to store. All right. I hope this is clear for you guys. In the coming sessions, we'll be looking into hands-on exercises of how to create EBS, how to create S3, how to create EFS and mount. We will do a lot of exercises. I request you guys to look into the exercises and do some hands-on exercises. Thank you for watching. Take care.